There's a kind of danger that never announces itself with violence. It arrives in the quiet of the afternoon, in that oppressive heat when the whole world just seems to pause. It doesn't break down your door, it never threatens, it just waits. It waits for that moment your guard is down, a moment of vulnerability, and then it begins its work. This is an exploration of that exact danger. The one that doesn't attack but invites, the one that doesn't conquer but simply distracts.
You see, we're conditioned to recognize the loud, aggressive, immediate threats. We build our defenses against the things we can see coming. But the most profound destructions, they're silent. They're seductive. They don't work through force, but through a slow, almost imperceptible erosion of our very foundations. And that's the nature of the force we're examining here. A collapse that doesn't start with a bang, but with a barely audible whisper.
And the entry point for this kind of collapse, it isn't fear, it's fascination. It's that pull of something new, something intriguing, something that promises just a moment of relief from the weight of your own thoughts or the burden of responsibility. The thing is, we're not dragged away against our will. No, we follow, willingly, step by step, drawn in by a curiosity we don't discipline, led by an attraction we don't question, until eventually we realize we're completely lost. In the folklore of the Guarani people, there's a figure that embodies this perfectly. Jasy Jatere. Now, he's often shown as a small, fair-haired child, so he's not a monster in the way we usually think of them. He's a symbol. And Jasy Jatere isn't about innocence. He is the very embodiment of temptation that distracts. So for our purposes, let's treat him not as a character in some old story, but as a psychological blueprint, a precise symbolic diagram of how temptation actually works, how distraction operates, and how we willingly take part in our own unraveling. And this brings us to a really foundational question about ourselves. Why is this? Why are we more vulnerable to attraction than to fear? Well, fear triggers our survival instincts, right? Fight or flight. It's a powerful but defensive mechanism. Attraction, though, it hijacks a different, more ancient system. It lights up the pathways of reward and novelty in our brains. We are hardwired to seek out the new, to chase immediate gratification. And this ancient wiring, which was once essential for our survival, has become a massive vulnerability in a world just saturated with engineered novelty. Temptation doesn't have to break down our defenses. It just walks right past them by offering a promise our biology struggles to refuse. So our analysis is going to follow a very clear path. We'll start by defining this invisible danger. Then we'll decode the myth, dissect the anatomy of temptation and how it fragments the self. From there, we'll connect it to our modern algorithmic world. And finally, we'll turn that analysis inward, on ourselves. First, el peligro invisible, the invisible danger. The threat we're talking about isn't some external aggressor. It's an internal vulnerability. And it's invisible because it mirrors our own desires, so it feels less like an attack and more like a choice we are freely making. Which brings us to our second part, el patrón del mito, the pattern of the myth. Here, we move from the abstract idea to the specific blueprint, decoding the myth to reveal its structure, a precise map of how we are led astray. The myth's real power is in its symbolic precision. First, it says Jasy Jatere appears during the siesta. Symbolically, this is any time our vigilance is lowered, when we're tired, bored, when our discipline is relaxed. Then there's the whistle. It's not a command. It's a subtle, non-coercive invitation that just kind of floats on the air, easy to ignore, but just intriguing enough to notice. The victim is always a child, which represents the immature part of us, the part that lacks discernment and is guided by pure, undisciplined curiosity. And finally, the most crucial element, the total absence of force. The child is never taken, the child follows. Surrender is entirely voluntary. And that's the key. The power of this temptation lies completely in our own complicity. So for our third section, we look at la anatomía de la tentación, the anatomy of temptation. Now that we've decoded the external pattern of the myth, we turn inward to answer the question, how does this actually operate inside the human mind? At its very core, every single moment of temptation is a conflict between two opposing forces within us, impulse versus structure. It's the raw, primal pull for immediate gratification fighting against the disciplined, often difficult, pursuit of a long-term purpose. It's the choice between a fleeting pleasure that's easy to get and the hard work of building profound meaning. Moment to moment, it is the battle between our undisciplined curiosity, that desire to look at anything that glitters, and a focused, unwavering intention.
Jasy Jatere wins every time impulse triumphs over structure. And this isn't just a philosophical struggle. It has a clear neurological basis. Each time we give in to a small distraction, our brain gives us a hit of dopamine, that neurotransmitter of reward. This creates a reinforcement loop. The more we follow these temptations, the more our brain craves them, carving out pathways that look a lot like addiction. Over time, this constant chase for small, easy rewards gradually weakens our executive control, the part of our brain responsible for focus and impulse control. This isn't a sudden collapse. It's a slow, quiet erosion of willpower. It's a death by 1,000 paper cuts to our ability to do anything meaningful and ultimately to our coherent self.
This brings us to the most severe consequence, the existential cost. Section 4, La fragmentación del ser, the fragmentation of self. Because the true damage of chronic distraction isn't the loss of time, it's the loss of a unified self. We have to reframe how we think about distraction. It's not just a trivial lack of focus. It is an active process of identity fragmentation. A coherent identity is built on a narrative, a story we tell ourselves about who we are and where we are going. And that story requires continuity of thought. But when we live in a state of constant reaction to external pings and notifications, that narrative continuity is shattered. We stop being the author of our own story. We just become a collection of disconnected impulses, no longer an integrated person, but an aggregate of reactions. And this leads to an unavoidable conclusion. A meaningful life isn't something you find, it's something you build. And that requires sustained effort. It requires focus and the ability to subordinate short-term desires to long-term values. It requires structure. A mind that's constantly fragmented, a mind that can't sustain attention, well, it lacks the fundamental tool required for this construction. It's like trying to build a cathedral with sand. The pieces will not hold. Meaning is the outcome of integrated, focused effort over time, and a fragmented mind is simply incapable of this integration. And for Section 5, we look at el silbido algorítmico, the algorithmic whistle. You see, this ancient psychological pattern hasn't gone anywhere. It's been industrialized. It's been scaled and perfected into the very environment we now live in, a habitat that has been engineered for Jasy Jatere. So what is the modern equivalent of that subtle, non-coercive whistle? It's the infinite scroll. Just think about the design genius behind it. It's a seamless, never-ending stream of stimulation. And crucially, it requires no conscious decision to continue. There's no moment to pause and ask, do I want more? You just have to do nothing. Your passive inaction is all that's required for the temptation to go on. It's the most perfect, frictionless delivery system for distraction ever invented. A whistle that blows continuously as long as you're willing to listen. And what's being delivered by this digital whistle? The modern seduction, constant personalized novelty. Our digital world is powered by algorithms whose only purpose is to learn what captivates you and then deliver an endless, refined stream of it. This system is a direct and deliberate exploitation of our attraction to the new. It has literally weaponized our own curiosity against us, creating a state of perpetual, low-grade fascination, designed to hold us in place, scrolling indefinitely. So let's be perfectly clear. The attention economy didn't create a new problem. It just took the ancient structure of Jasy Jatere and engineered a digital version, one that's infinitely more powerful, pervasive, and persistent. This version doesn't just show up during the siesta. This Jasy Jatere never sleeps. Its whistle is always in our pocket, always waiting for a moment of boredom, ready to lead us away. And that brings us to our final section, confrontación y cierre, confrontation and closing. Now that we've analyzed the myth, the psychology, and its modern form, it's time to turn the lens inward. The analysis must become a confrontation. The constant pull of distraction is rarely about the allure of the distraction itself. It's usually about what we're turning away from. So ask yourself, honestly, when you reach for your phone, when you open another tab, what is the important, difficult work that you're postponing? Is it that creative project that demands vulnerability? That hard conversation that requires courage? What responsibility, to yourself or to others, are you avoiding by choosing the easy path of distraction? And let's go one level deeper. Maybe it's not just a task you're avoiding. Maybe it's a state of being. What silence are you escaping? In the absence of external noise, we are left alone with our own thoughts, our anxieties, our questions about our lives. And for many of us, this internal silence is terrifying. The constant noise of distraction becomes a shield, a way to avoid the uncomfortable but necessary work of self-confrontation. What truth about yourself are you unwilling to face in the quiet? And this leads us to the core insight. The whistle of Jasy Jatere is loudest to those who have no music of their own to follow. Temptation in all its forms finds fertile ground in a life that lacks a strong, compelling purpose. When your why is weak, any distraction becomes a viable alternative. A clear, deeply held purpose isn't just a motivator, it's a shield. It is the internal structure that repels the call to fragmentation. It provides an answer to what for that is far more compelling than the call of what if. So, our final reframing is this. Jasy Jatere is not some mythical creature in the forest. He is not the algorithm. He is the force inside each of us that prefers the comfort of ease over the difficulty of growth. It is the part of our own nature that chooses passive consumption over active creation, the familiar loop over the challenging new path. It whispers instead of attacks, and that is precisely why so often it wins. We are left, then, with a choice that is both simple and profound, a choice between the intentional construction of a life and the passive acceptance of a destiny shaped by distraction. Because if you do not consciously build the structure of your own focus, your own values, your own meaning, the forces of distraction will build your destiny for you, and that is a structure that leads nowhere. The battle against the seductive force is the silent daily struggle for the very integrity of your life itself.